She was hunted and snared like an animal, until one human rushed to save her. It was a quiet afternoon in the small village of Mirapur, a place surrounded by thick forests and winding paths. Life there moved slowly, marked by the rhythm of daily chores and the laughter of children playing near the river. Among the villagers lived a young woman named Layla. She was known for her gentle nature, bright smile, and curious spirit. Unlike many in the village, she loved wandering into the woods not out of carelessness, but because she felt at home among the trees, birds, and the rustle of leaves. The forest was her sanctuary, a place where she could think, dream, and feel free. On that particular day, the sun hung high in the sky, warming the earth and casting golden light through the branches. Layla had set out early, carrying a small basket to gather firewood for her family. She hummed softly as she walked along the narrow paths, enjoying the soft crunch of dried leaves under her feet. Birds chirped above, and the distant sound of water flowing from a nearby stream added music to her journey. She was happy, completely unaware that danger was waiting in the shadows, hidden from view. As she ventured deeper into the forest, Layla's curiosity led her slightly off the familiar path. She wanted to explore a small clearing she had noticed on a previous visit. The clearing promised sunlight and wildflowers, a perfect spot to rest and gather wood. But as she stepped carefully among the undergrowth, she didn't notice the thin, almost invisible wire stretched across a narrow trail. With a sudden snap, the wire tightened around her ankle, jerking her to the ground. Pain shot through her leg, and she cried out instinctively. At first, she thought she could free herself quickly. She tugged at the wire with all her strength, twisting and pulling, but it didn't budge. The trap held her firmly, and panic started to creep in. The forest, which moments ago had been comforting and familiar, now seemed like a strange and dangerous place. Every shadow looked threatening, every rustle of leaves sounded like a warning. Layla's heart pounded in her chest as she tried again and again, but the more she struggled, the more entangled she became. Minutes passed like hours. Layla's initial panic transformed into fear and hopelessness. She called out, hoping someone from the village might hear her, but the dense forest swallowed her cries. Her voice seemed to vanish among the trees, and she realized she was completely alone. The sun slowly began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows through the branches. Layla shivered, partly from fear and partly from the chill that crept into the forest as evening approached. She knew she needed help, but the thought of no one coming made her chest tighten with anxiety. Sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree, Layla tried to calm herself. She breathed deeply, listening to the forest around her. Birds had grown quiet, replaced by the distant calls of insects and the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Her ankle throbbed painfully, and she realized she had no way of moving without risking further injury. She thought about her family, her mother who would be worried and her younger brother who might panic if she didn't return soon. The worry added to her fear, but also fueled a small spark of determination. She couldn't give up, not yet. Hours passed slowly, each minute stretching endlessly. Layla tried to make herself comfortable, resting her ankle on a rock and carefully shifting her weight. Hunger and thirst began to gnaw at her, but the forest offered no easy food or water for someone trapped. She kept calling out, even though her voice was hoarse and cracked. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps, and her heart leapt with hope, only to realize it was the sound of falling leaves or a distant animal. Each false alarm was a crushing disappointment, making her feel even more alone. As darkness began to fall, Layla's mind wandered to the stories she had heard as a child. Tales of people lost in the forest, of animals and humans falling into traps, and of strangers who sometimes came to rescue them. She clung to these memories, hoping that the stories of bravery and kindness would somehow come true for her. She imagined a kind stranger noticing her plight and coming to help, and in her imagination she felt a small comfort. It was a fragile hope, but in that moment, hope was all she had left. The night arrived with a quiet, unsettling calm. The moon rose, casting silver light through the trees. Layla could hear the occasional owl hoot and the rustling of unseen creatures. Shadows danced around her, and the forest felt alive in a way that made her skin crawl. She tried to stay alert, knowing that moving too much could worsen her ankle injury, but remaining still was just as terrifying. The cold began to settle into her bones, and she wrapped her arms around herself for warmth. Despite the fear, she refused to give in to despair. She whispered to herself, promising that she would survive. Somewhere deep in the forest, far from the village, a man named Tarek was conducting his evening rounds. Tarek was a local wildlife volunteer who often patrolled the forest, not only to protect animals, but also to watch for any danger to villagers. He had a keen sense of hearing and an instinct for noticing when something was wrong. That evening, as he walked along a familiar path, he heard a faint, distressed cry. At first, he thought it was an animal, but there was something human in the tone, a note of fear and urgency that made him pause. Following the sound carefully, Tarek moved through the trees with practiced stealth. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing small glimpses of the forest floor. Then he heard it again, this time clearer. It was definitely a human voice calling out in desperation. His heart raced, knowing that someone could be trapped, injured, or in danger. With determination, he quickened his pace, scanning the underbrush for any sign of movement. And then he saw her, a young woman sitting on the ground, her ankle caught in a cruel snare. Layla's eyes met Tarek's and relief flooded her. She had almost given up hope, thinking she would be alone all night. Tarek approached carefully, speaking in a calm, reassuring voice. "Don't worry, I'm here to help." "You're safe now?" Layla's voice trembled as she tried to explain how she had ended up in the trap, and Tarek nodded, understanding her situation without judgment. He gently examined the snare and her ankle, preparing to release her from the cruel metal wire that had held her captive. With careful hands, Tarek worked to free Layla. He untwisted the snare and loosened the wires slowly, making sure not to hurt her further. Layla flinched at every movement, but Tarek's steady presence and soothing words calmed her. Minutes felt like hours as he worked, but eventually the trap gave way. Layla's ankle was sore, but she was free. She stumbled to her feet, leaning on Tarek for support, and allowed herself to feel a flood of gratitude and relief. She was alive, and someone had come to her rescue. The journey back to the village was slow but careful. Tarek supported her, talking to her to keep her mind off the pain. Layla's heart was still pounding, but she felt a newfound sense of safety. As the lights of the village came into view, she realized how close she had come to disaster. Her family rushed to meet her, overwhelmed with relief and concern. That night, in the warmth of her home, Layla thought about the forest, the trap, and the stranger who had saved her. She knew that her life had changed forever, not because of the danger, but because of the courage and kindness of a single human being. The incident left a lasting impression on her and the village. Poachers and illegal traps became a topic of serious concern, and the villagers worked together to ensure safety for everyone who entered the forest. Layla, though shaken, grew stronger and more cautious. She continued to love the forest, but with a new respect for its dangers. And whenever she saw Tarek, she remembered that even in the darkest moments, hope and humanity could prevail. After the sudden snap of the wire, Layla felt a sharp pain shoot up her leg. Her ankle was trapped, held tightly by a hidden snare, and no matter how much she tugged and twisted, it would not give way. For a moment, she froze in disbelief. The forest, which had always seemed calm and welcoming, now appeared threatening and unforgiving. Her heart pounded furiously as she realized the severity of her situation. She was trapped alone, far from the village, with no one nearby to hear her cries. Layla tried to stay calm, but fear was relentless. She called out for help, her voice breaking through the silence of the forest. "Help, please, somebody!" she shouted. The echoes bounced off the trees, but only silence responded. A small bird flitted past, startled by her cries, and a rustling in the bushes made her jump. Every sound amplified her fear. She could not tell if it was an animal, the wind, or something else. Her mind raced with thoughts of danger, wolves, snakes, even humans who might take advantage of her helplessness. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried to steady her shaking body. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The sun, once high in the sky, began to sink toward the horizon. Shadows grew longer, painting the forest in hues of gold and gray. Layla's ankle throbbed painfully, and exhaustion settled heavily in her limbs. She had tugged at the snare so much that her strength was almost gone. She realized that continuing to struggle without thinking might only make the situation worse. Slowly, she forced herself to breathe deeply and assess her surroundings. She noticed the uneven ground, the fallen branches, and the soft carpet of leaves beneath her. With careful movements, she tried shifting her position, easing the tension on her ankle while avoiding further injury. As she adjusted herself, Layla's thoughts drifted to her family. Her mother would be worried, preparing food and hoping she would return safely. Her younger brother might be anxious, imagining all sorts of dangers. The thought of leaving them alone filled her with a mixture of fear and determination. She could not give up. She whispered quietly to herself, "I will survive. I must survive." It was a simple promise, but it gave her a spark of courage in a moment when everything else felt overwhelming. The forest around her was no longer comforting. The cheerful songs of birds were replaced by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. Tiny eyes of nocturnal animals glimmered in the fading light, and she imagined each shadow moving toward her. Layla's mind created scenarios worse than reality. Every snap of a twig, every movement in the underbrush felt like a threat. She realized how vulnerable she was, caught in a trap alone with only her thoughts for company. Yet, despite the fear, she reminded herself that panic would not help. She needed to think clearly, to preserve her energy, and to wait for a chance of rescue. Hours passed slowly, marked only by the shifting light and the changing sounds of the forest. Layla tried to move again, testing the snare carefully, but it held firm. Her muscles ached, and hunger and thirst began to make themselves known. She had nothing to eat or drink, and the thought of waiting for hours, or even overnight, was daunting. She leaned against a tree for support and tried to rest, knowing she would need all her strength to survive until help arrived. The night would be long, and she would have to be patient, despite the pain and fear. Night fell, and with it came a strange, quiet darkness. The moon rose slowly, casting soft light that barely penetrated the thick canopy of trees. Shadows danced on the forest floor, creating shapes that seemed alive in the corners of her eyes. Layla tried to focus on the moonlight, using it to find small comfort in its gentle glow. She remembered the stories she had heard as a child, of people trapped in forests and rescued by strangers. Those stories had always seemed distant and unreal, but now they gave her hope. She imagined someone hearing her cries and rushing to her side, someone who would not leave her behind. It was a fragile hope, but hope was all she had left. The forest was alive with sounds she had never noticed during the day. The chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the soft steps of small animals created a symphony that was both beautiful and frightening. Layla tried to listen carefully, hoping to catch a sound that would indicate another human nearby. She strained her ears, calling out again in a whisper, careful not to shout and waste her remaining energy. "Please, someone help me," she whispered into the night, her voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. Sleep was impossible, even though fatigue weighed heavily on her. Every time her body relaxed, she was jolted awake by a sudden movement or imagined threat. She realized that staying awake and alert was essential for her survival. She carefully shifted her weight, protecting her injured ankle, and tried to maintain a calm breathing rhythm. Her mind wandered, thinking about her family, the village, and the forest she had loved so much. Now the forest seemed like a maze, a place of hidden dangers and cruel surprises. Yet she refused to surrender to despair. The cold of the night began to settle in, and Layla wrapped her arms around herself for warmth. Her teeth chattered, and her body shivered, but she fought to stay awake. She tried to focus on the sound of her own breathing, reminding herself that she was alive, and that being alive meant she had a chance. She recited stories in her mind, sang quietly to herself, and counted each breath, doing anything to stay conscious and aware. The darkness of the forest was overwhelming, but her determination was stronger. She would survive this night. As the hours crawled by, Layla began to notice small things she had not seen before. The gentle sway of branches in the wind, the soft glow of the moonlight on leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, these became her companions. She realized that the forest was not only dangerous, it was alive, and every creature within it was simply following its instincts. She reminded herself that she, too, had instincts, and that she needed to rely on them to stay safe. The forest was no longer her enemy, but a challenge she needed to face. Layla also began to think about what she could do if no one came to help. She considered the possibility of trying to free herself from the trap, but she knew that reckless movements could worsen her injury. She thought about gathering sticks or rocks to use as tools, or trying to carefully loosen the snare with patience. Her mind worked like a puzzle, planning step by step what she could do if she remained trapped. Each idea gave her a sense of control, a feeling that she was not completely powerless. Even in the darkest moments, her mind found ways to fight back. Hours passed, and the first signs of dawn began to appear. A pale, pinkish light crept through the trees, signaling that a new day had arrived. Layla felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had survived the night, but her ankle still throbbed painfully and she was still trapped. The forest, now illuminated by daylight, seemed less frightening, but she knew she still needed help. The hope of rescue grew stronger in her heart. She whispered a quiet prayer for someone to find her soon, her voice filled with both fear and determination. Layla tried again to shift her position, testing the snare with careful movements. The wire tightened at first, but she noticed that with a little patience she could wiggle her ankle slightly. She moved slowly, inch by inch, conserving her energy and avoiding sudden movements. Each small success gave her hope. She reminded herself that survival often came not from strength alone, but from patience, awareness, and courage. With every careful effort, she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and mentally. As the day grew brighter, the forest came alive with sounds once again. Birds sang their morning songs, squirrels leapt from branch to branch, and the wind whispered through the trees. Layla took comfort in the familiar sounds, using them to steady herself. She knew that being alert was still essential, as the forest could be unpredictable. Yet she also recognized the beauty around her, even in such a dangerous situation. Nature was both her challenge and her companion, and she vowed to respect it while finding a way out. By mid-morning, Layla's hope began to turn into quiet optimism. She had survived the night, she had not given in to panic, and she had kept herself alert and conscious. Each moment of survival was a victory, and she recognized her own resilience. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I will get out." The words were not just encouragement, they were a promise, a determination to fight for her life. The forest could trap her body, but it could not trap her spirit. Then as she strained her ears once more, she heard something faint but unmistakable, the sound of footsteps approaching. Her heart leapt. Could it be someone from the village? Was help finally coming? She called out with the last of her strength, "Help!" "Over here," her voice carried across the clearing, trembling with fear and hope. The footsteps grew closer, more deliberate. Layla felt a surge of relief she could not describe. She was not alone anymore. Someone had come. The sound of footsteps grew louder and closer, echoing through the forest like a small promise of hope. Layla's heart raced so fast it felt as if it might burst from her chest. Her voice trembled as she called out again, louder this time, "Please. Someone help me." The voice that finally responded was calm and steady, carrying authority and kindness. "I hear you, hold on, I'm coming." The words filled her with relief and disbelief. After hours of fear and solitude, someone was finally there. Through the thickets and over fallen branches, Tarek moved swiftly but carefully. He had been patrolling the forest as part of his usual evening rounds, checking for signs of animals in danger and watching for anything unusual. When he heard the faint, desperate cries, he knew immediately that a person was in trouble. His instincts told him to act quickly, but also with caution. Every step through the forest required attention, as he did not want to startle any animals or create new dangers. Yet the thought of someone trapped and vulnerable kept him moving forward with urgency. Finally, Tarek spotted her, sitting on the forest floor, tangled in a cruel metal snare. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and her ankles swelled and red from the trap. She had been alone through the night, with pain, fear, and exhaustion etched into her features. When her eyes met his, relief flooded over her like a warm wave. "You're here," she whispered, barely able to believe it. Thank you for coming." Tarek smiled reassuringly and crouched down to assess her situation. "Don't worry, you're safe now. We'll get you out of this," he said gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Tarek examined the snare carefully. It was a cruelly designed wire trap, set to catch animals, but in this case, it had ensnared a human. He noted the tightness around her ankle and the swelling that had already begun. He knew he had to act carefully to avoid causing further injury. "This might hurt a little," he said softly, "but I'll be as careful as I can." Layla nodded, bracing herself. She had been through so much already, and though fear still gripped her, a fragile trust began to form in the presence of this stranger who had come to save her. With steady hands, Tarek began working on the trap. He untwisted the wire carefully, ensuring that no sudden movements would tighten it further. Layla flinched at every twist and pull, the pain shooting up her leg, but Tarek's calm voice kept her focused. "Breathe slowly, it's almost done. You're doing great," he said. Each word was a lifeline, each gentle motion a promise that she would soon be free. Minutes passed slowly, but with careful attention, the cruel snare finally loosened. Tarek lifted it off her ankle, and for the first time in hours, Layla felt a wave of relief and disbelief. She could move her foot. She was no longer trapped. Layla's ankle throbbed painfully, but the immediate danger had passed. Tarek helped her to her feet, supporting her under the arms as she adjusted her weight carefully. Every step was tentative, but she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she could not stop the shaky laughter that bubbled up from relief. I can't believe you found me," she said, her voice trembling. Tarek smiled and shook his head. "You're welcome, you're brave, you made it through the night, that's what matters." The journey back to the village was slow but deliberate. Tarek guided her along the familiar paths, though the forest still seemed imposing. Layla clung to his arm, drawing strength from his presence. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves reminded her of the peril she had been in, but knowing she was not alone now made the world seem less threatening. Tarek spoke softly, distracting her with stories of the forest, of animals he had saved, and of the rare beauty hidden in the wild. His calm, confident words helped soothe the lingering fear in her mind. Along the way, Tarek occasionally stopped to let her rest, gently supporting her as she shifted her weight. Layla marveled at his patience. He did not rush her or make her feel like a burden. Instead, he treated her with dignity, showing that even in moments of fear and vulnerability, kindness could prevail. She thought about the long hours she had spent alone, and now realized that hope had been enough to keep her going. It was hope and the idea that someone might come that had given her the courage to survive. As the village came into view, Layla's heart swelled with relief. Familiar rooftops appeared through the trees, and she could see the early morning villagers beginning their day. Her family, waiting anxiously, ran toward her the moment they noticed her. Her mother's voice broke as she called out her name, and her younger brother tripped over his feet in his haste to reach her. Layla felt the warmth of their embrace, and for a moment all the fear, pain, and exhaustion melted away. She was safe. She was home. The villagers crowded around, asking questions and praising Tarek's bravery. He explained briefly what had happened, describing the trap and how careful they had to be to avoid hurting her further. Layla listened, feeling grateful not only for her own rescue, but for the awareness that this event might prevent future accidents. The snare that had ensnared her was removed from the forest, and the villagers promised to watch for any other traps, ensuring that no one else would face a similar ordeal. Once inside her home, Layla's ankle was carefully treated. The swelling was serious, but with rest and proper care it would heal. She sat quietly, reflecting on the night she had survived. Fear had dominated her hours in the forest, but it was courage, patience, and trust that had saved her. She thought about Tarek's calm presence, his careful attention, and his determination to help. That one human, acting with compassion, had turned a night of terror into a story of survival. Layla's thoughts also turned inward. She realized that the forest, which had always seemed welcoming, was full of hidden dangers. It was not enough to love the wild. One had to respect it and remain vigilant. She felt a new awareness of her surroundings and a deeper appreciation for life itself. Each breath, each heartbeat was now precious. The ordeal had left scars, but it had also strengthened her spirit. She had survived what seemed impossible, and in doing so, discovered a resilience she had not known she possessed. Tarek stayed with her family for a short while, ensuring she was comfortable and that the villagers understood how to prevent similar accidents. Layla watched him, feeling a mixture of admiration and gratitude. He had risked time, energy, and effort to help someone he did not even know. His selflessness reminded her that humanity could shine brightest in moments of fear and danger. The world was full of challenges, but acts of kindness, no matter how small, could change outcomes and save lives. In the days that followed, Layla slowly regained her strength. She remained cautious, tending to her ankle carefully, but she also began to regain her confidence. The forest no longer seemed threatening, but she treated it with a new level of respect. She walked along familiar paths, keeping alert and mindful, knowing that awareness could prevent danger. She also shared her story with others in the village, not as a tale of fear, but as a lesson of courage, patience, and the power of kindness. Layla and Tarek formed a lasting bond after that day. He became a mentor of sorts, teaching her about the forest, how to move safely, and how to respect the wilderness without fear. She listened eagerly, absorbing his knowledge while sharing her own experiences. Together, they encouraged the villagers to be vigilant and compassionate, creating a safer environment for everyone. The snare that had trapped her was a reminder of danger, but also of the incredible power of human care and bravery. Reflecting on the experience, Layla realized that her ordeal had changed her profoundly. She had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, and yet she had survived. She had been trapped, but hope and courage had kept her alive. And most importantly, she had been rescued by a human who acted with selflessness and determination. That rescue was not just a moment of physical salvation. It was a testament to the enduring power of compassion and trust. The forest, once a place of fear, became a symbol of her resilience. Every tree, every rustle of leaves reminded her of the night she had survived and the human kindness that had saved her. She no longer saw the forest as a threat, but as a living entity full of life and lessons. And whenever she walked its paths, she remembered the importance of vigilance, patience, and hope. The snare had been cruel, but it had also revealed the strength of the human spirit in the face of danger. Layla's story spread throughout the village and beyond, inspiring others to respect the forest, look out for one another, and act with courage when needed. Her experience became a reminder that life could be unpredictable, but hope, courage, and compassion could make all the difference. She never forgot Tariq, the man who had rushed to her side when she was most vulnerable, and she carried the lessons of that night in her heart forever. After the harrowing night in the forest, Layla returned home to the warmth and comfort of her family. The first thing she noticed was how much the sunlight seemed to embrace her, how the familiar sounds of the village, the clanging of pots, the chatter of children, and the crowing of roosters, felt like a protective cocoon after hours spent in fear. She was exhausted, every muscle in her body aching, and her ankle throbbed with pain. Yet the safety of her home filled her with a sense of relief so deep it almost overwhelmed her. She sank onto a chair, grateful for the presence of her mother, who hovered nearby, tending to her every need with a mix of worry and tenderness. Layla's mother carefully examined her ankle, gently cleaning and dressing the wound. "You're safe now, my child," she said softly, her voice trembling. "That's all that matters." Layla nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, not of fear, but of relief. The ordeal of the previous hours seemed almost unreal, like a dark dream from which she had finally awakened. She could feel the lingering anxiety in her chest, a tightness that only slowly loosened as the minutes passed. Her younger brother sat beside her, holding her hand and asking questions in a voice that was a mixture of concern and awe. Every small gesture from her family reminded her of the warmth and love that had waited for her all along. Despite the relief of being home, Layla knew that the physical recovery would take time. Her ankle was swollen and sore, a reminder of the trap that had ensnared her so cruelly. She had to move carefully, avoiding sudden pressure, and her family ensured that she rested as much as possible. For the first few days, even simple tasks like standing or walking a few steps were difficult. But Layla refused to let the injury define her. Each cautious movement was a small victory, a reminder that her body, though battered, was strong and capable of healing. She approached her recovery with the same patience and determination she had used to survive the forest. The village responded to her ordeal with a mix of concern and action. Word of what had happened spread quickly, and neighbors visited to offer support, share food, and check on her well-being. Their visits were not only comforting but also a reminder that the community was interconnected and that no one was truly alone. Villagers began discussing ways to prevent similar accidents, organizing patrols and looking for signs of traps in the forest. The incident sparked a wave of vigilance, creating a safer environment not only for humans but also for the animals of the forest. Layla's story became a catalyst for awareness, a reminder that danger often lurked unnoticed, and that collective care could prevent tragedy. As days passed, Layla's ankle slowly healed, and she found herself reflecting more deeply on the experience. She realized that fear had taught her lessons she could not have learned in any other way. The hours she spent alone in the forest had forced her to confront vulnerability, to rely on patience, and to recognize the power of hope. She thought about every small sensation, the way the cool night air brushed against her skin, the rustle of leaves that had once seemed threatening, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, and understood that her awareness had been her ally. Survival, she realized, was not just about escaping danger, but about understanding one's environment and respecting its power. Layla also reflected on the role of human kindness in her rescue. Tariq, the man who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, had risked his time and energy to help someone he did not know. His calm, steady presence had turned panic into relief, fear into trust. She understood that bravery did not always involve grand gestures or dangerous feats. Sometimes, it was in the quiet determination to help another person, to act with care and compassion even when it was inconvenient. She carried this lesson with her, realizing that humanity, at its best, could shine brightest in moments of need. As her physical strength returned, Layla felt a growing desire to give back. She began assisting villagers with patrols along the forest paths, helping to identify potential hazards and sharing her story as a cautionary tale. Her experiences made her a voice of awareness and safety, someone whose words carried the weight of first-hand experience. She spoke to children, teaching them to respect the forest while remaining cautious. She advised adults on the importance of vigilance, encouraging them to look out for one another. Her ordeal, while terrifying, had transformed her into a source of knowledge and guidance for her community. Layla also learned to embrace her emotions. The fear and anxiety she had felt were not weaknesses, but natural responses to a dangerous situation. She allowed herself to cry, to express gratitude, and to share the depth of her experience with trusted friends and family. Each conversation helped her process the events, turning trauma into understanding. By reflecting on her journey, she strengthened not only her body, but also her mind and spirit. She realized that resilience was built not only through endurance, but also through acknowledging one's vulnerabilities and learning from them. Over time, the forest itself became a symbol of both danger and beauty. Layla returned to the paths she had once wandered freely, moving with caution but also with appreciation. She noticed details she had previously overlooked, the way sunlight filtered through the branches, the delicate patterns of leaves, the songs of birds that seemed to celebrate life itself. The forest had not changed. It was still wild, unpredictable, and sometimes threatening. But she had changed. She walked with awareness, respect, and a newfound sense of harmony with her surroundings. Her survival had taught her to value life in all its forms, and every step she took was infused with gratitude. The relationship between Layla and Tariq grew stronger in the weeks that followed. He continued to guide her, sharing his knowledge of the forest, teaching her how to move safely, and helping her understand the behavior of wildlife. Their bond was built on mutual respect, gratitude, and shared experiences. Layla came to see him not only as a rescuer, but also as a mentor and friend. Through their collaboration, they strengthened the safety of the village, creating patrol routines, marking dangerous areas, and educating the community about forest safety. Together, they became a team dedicated to protecting life and fostering awareness. Layla's recovery was not only physical but emotional. She discovered the importance of patience, courage, and trust. Her body had healed, but the lessons she had learned endured. She understood that fear was not an enemy but a signal, a reminder to remain aware and prepared. She recognized the value of human kindness, the power of hope, and the strength that lay in community support. Every conversation with villagers, every patrol in the forest, and every reflection on her ordeal reinforced the resilience she had cultivated. The experience also prompted Layla to consider the wider implications of safety and compassion. She advocated for stricter monitoring of traps and the protection of wildlife, understanding that danger to animals often signaled danger to humans. She organized small groups to clear paths, educate children, and ensure that the forest remained a safe space for exploration. Her personal ordeal became a source of community action, transforming fear into proactive measures. Layla's story reminded everyone that vigilance, empathy, and cooperation could prevent tragedy before it struck. As months passed, Layla regained her full strength. Her ankle healed completely, leaving only a faint scar as a reminder of the night she had survived. She continued her daily walks in the forest, mindful of potential hazards, but filled with appreciation for the life around her. She celebrated small victories, spotting wildlife safely, navigating tricky paths, or helping a fellow villager avoid danger. Each achievement was a testament to her resilience, a reminder that survival was not just about enduring hardships, but also about learning, growing, and giving back. Layla's story remained a constant topic in the village, not as a tale of fear, but as a narrative of hope, courage, and community spirit. Children asked to hear her story repeatedly, and adults sought her advice. She became a symbol of perseverance, showing that even the most frightening experiences could be overcome with patience, trust, and support. The lessons she had learned in the forest extended beyond survival. They applied to daily life, relationships, and the way the villagers treated each other. Even years later, Layla reflected on that night with gratitude rather than fear. She remembered the moments of panic, the ache of her ankle, and the overwhelming solitude. But she also remembered the calm presence of Tarek, the comforting words of her family, and the strength she discovered within herself. That night had shaped her, teaching her lessons that could not be learned in comfort or safety. It had shown her the power of hope, the importance of awareness, and the enduring value of human kindness. The forest, once a place of terror, had become a teacher. Every tree, every path, and every sound reminded her of the delicate balance between danger and beauty. She walked with caution, but also with gratitude, appreciating the life around her. She had learned that fear, when acknowledged and managed, could become a guide rather than a barrier. And in every step she took, she carried the memory of her rescue, the lessons of patience, and the proof that even in the darkest moments, hope could light the way. Layla's recovery and the lessons she learned inspired the village to take ongoing precautions. The villagers marked safe paths, monitored the forest for traps, and shared knowledge about wildlife safety. Her ordeal had become more than a personal story. It was a guide for collective survival and awareness. By acting on her experience, the community created a safer environment, and Layla felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her suffering had contributed to the well-being of others. Through her journey of recovery, reflection, and action, Layla transformed from a victim of circumstance into a beacon of courage and wisdom. Her story demonstrated that survival was not just a matter of escaping danger. It was about learning from the experience, acting with care, and contributing to the safety and awareness of others. Each day, as she moved through the forest and the village, she carried the lessons of that night, ensuring that fear would never paralyze her and that hope would always guide her path.